Repo men women of Reddit. What lengths do debtors go to protect their property? What is your craziest repo story? Went out on a repo that was a first payment default. We had spoken to these people earlier in the week and had promised to be in by closing time on Friday, which had passed. So as we approached the house, the car was clearly in the driveway, but the driver overshot and had to make a U-turn. In the time it took to do that, the people had moved the car behind their house and began to destroy it. Windows smashed, body panels smashed with chains, some unidentifiable substance poured on the seats. To top it off, they were violent towards us as well, threatening us with their pit bull, hit us, threw the keys at one guy's head. About a year later, the guy who bought it originally came by and wanted to buy another car. It felt good to tell him to frick right the heck off the lot. I was working for a property management company and was asked to go check out a house that had evicted the renters. I went with a maintenance man and we were absolutely floored. The house was empty, and I mean empty. The appliances, kitchen cupboards, sink storage area, plumbing and all the wiring for the house. There were 2 fireplaces gone, brick fronts taken, inside chimney taken, etc. Everything in living room, carpet, even carpet liner down to the cement. 2 bathrooms were gone, plumbing, shower tub, sink area, storage closet, etc. Door gone. Same with other bathroom. 3 bedrooms gone, everything once again, doors throughout the house, even the poles for hanging clothes. They were creative though, took the windows and left the storms. Hot water heater gone, furnace and AC gone. Even the bushes had been removed, and the outside light pole and all the wiring and outlets. Even some sheetrock was removed. When we got our jaws back off the floor, we checked with the neighbors and they said that yes, they had been very busy in the house. Won't ever forget that one. I was so mad that I just had to laugh. The company owner went and looked and came back looking shell-shocked. Never found the people, and believe me, we looked for a long time. I'm imagining a looting similar to how the Grinch stole Christmas. I did some repo work. I never had a gun pulled on me. I was never threatened over a repo. Most repos were uneventful because the owners knew they were behind on the payments and that we were there to do a job. The thing that I experienced the most was hiding the cars. It was a cat and mouse game. They keep moving the car, never leaving it overnight in the same place twice. One guy took the wheels off every night to make it more difficult to get. The most violent thing I experienced was a guy would not control his dog while I got the tractor that was being repossessed. I did not get bitten, but I was quite distracted by the dog. I feel like that's a good way to get your dog killed. Many moons ago, I had an employee who had previously been a repo man. His best story impressed me with its ingenuity. He had been tasked with repossessing vehicle from a number of unsavory folk. Instead of endangering himself, he simply arrived at the property with a large volume of inexpensive liquor and told the debtors that they had won a contest from the local liquor store. He returned about 3 hours later and removed the vehicle without incident. The old cheapo pin it depo incognito repo. My uncle and my dad were both repo guys at various points. My uncle was a regular repo guy, cos and whatnot. He had to carry pepper spray with him because he'd been attacked by so many dogs. His boss would not allow the employees to come back empty-handed, no matter how dangerous crap got. He told me one story about having to kick his car door open with his foot to keep a dog at bay. Sad, but maybe people shouldn't buy animals for the purpose of turning them into weapons, either. My dad worked repo for heavy machinery, which is a bit more complex because they were dealing with machines in the $500,000 range at times. He was shot at several times, offered massive amounts of drugs, usually as payment, and one guy started calling him constantly and threatening him. Said guy did a long time in jail for dealing drugs, because apparently construction guys in our area really like him. I used to repo cars in the past. I've had guns pulled on me a few times. My old boss told me that if they don't come out shooting, they probably aren't going to shoot you. It's been pretty true. My buddy had an owner run up to his truck, put a gun in his window, and shot him once in the chest. But my friend is a big guy, so he took it pretty well. He just hit the gas and took off. Shoot him once in the chest. He took it pretty well. Bad mother. Not me, but my cousin used to buy, polish, and see houses. They had this one family that was living in a house that got repossessed. When they came to inspect the house, the wife of the owner came out screaming that nobody was taking away their house. She did not even know why the house got repossessed. Turns out that the way the lady and her husband lived in the house is by her paying all the utility bills and him paying for the house. The problems was that he has not been paying for the house for about 6 months at that time and never told her. They fought tooth and nail to keep their house, but it was already owned by my cousin. My cousin and her husband eventually helped them move out and they took the wires with them when they left. They took the freaking electrical wires from all the walls and some of the pipes. This happens more than you know. I do not do loans on houses, but I do loans for cars. It is not uncommon for a husband to think that his wife is making the car payment when she is not. He finds out about the time we're ready to pick up the car. My GF at the time, who eventually became my wife, kept forgetting to make her car payments. Apparently after your 3rd time missing payments they just come get the car. Good guy repo man knocked on our door to let us go get her stuff out of the car before he took it. I always thought that was nice of him. I babysat for a man who worked in a repo job, and one of the worst stories he had involved this lady going crazy. So one of his co-workers was called out to repo a woman's truck. So the man gets there, starts hooking up chains and all the equipment. The lady comes running out of her office, jumps in the truck and speeds off. Little did she know that the repo man had accidentally chained himself to the back of the truck. She drug him for almost a mile and ended up killing him. My dad does vehicle repossessions and has a whole slew of stories. The one that stands out in my mind is from a few years ago. He went to pick up a truck. He was hooked up to it and getting ready to leave with it when the owner, a huge fat guy, came running out, waving his hands in the air, saying he wanted to get stuff out of the vehicle. My dad, being the nice guy that he is, stops and tells the guy that he can get whatever he wants out, and if he wants to he can sign some paperwork to make getting his car back a bit cheaper. As my dad is relaying this information, the guy lifts up a fold of fat and pulls a handgun on my dad, telling him to put the vehicle down. My dad went to drop the vehicle, jumps in his truck and got the frick out of Dodge with the vehicle. So, as a stupid college kid, I decided to get a new car. I had a job and was making payments on time. But then I lost my job and the new one I got didn't earn me enough to pay for the car. So it has to be repossessed. I was at school 2 hours away, so the repo guys never saw my car because it was never there at my parents' house. I come back for spring break and they call and say they have seen my car and they were going to pick it up the next day. I handed them the keys nicely and they left. Next day I am out with a friend and I get a call from another repo man, like super angry and yelling at me, "Where is the car?" Apparently he had been to my house and my brother was the only one there. He forced my brother to open the garage door to see if the car is there, even when my brother said someone had already taken it. I proceed to tell him that someone had picked the car up the other day and he ends the call with, "For your sake you better be right." It was kind of scary and I am pretty sure he was not allowed to have my brother open the garage to look inside. Now I will just buy a cheap car outright and drive it until it falls apart. Repo dude here. Man, oh man. I've seen debtors do some crazy crap. A woman who was about to have her car repossessed jumped between the tow truck and her car and shouted that she was 8 months pregnant, and if the guy wanted the truck, he'd have to run over her and be a baby killer. A debtor was having his truck repoed, so he got in his other car and ran over the tow driver while he was hooking the truck up. A driver hooked up a woman's car and she freaked out, screaming that her wallet was in the back seat. The driver let her open the door to get it, and she jumped in the back seat and said she wasn't leaving. The driver shrugged and drove to their storage lot a couple of miles away, with her screaming in horror the entire way. Wasn't 100% allowed, but I totally enjoyed the story later. Guy had just pulled out of the driveway with a debtor's truck, and the debtor charged out with a rifle and shot at him. The driver dove out of the truck and called the police, and the debtor was arrested. A couple of weeks later, we got a call from the debtor that he had paid off his truck and got it back, but he wanted to report damage to the vehicle caused by the driver. The damage? A bullet hole. From experiencing the other side, I can tell you that the guy showed up, hooked up my car and then knocked on my door and politely asked if I wanted to remove my property. helped me remove my stuff and then apologized and wished me better luck in the future. When my bank realized they'd made a horrible mistake and were repoing my car in error, the same guy towed it back to a local parking lot so we wouldn't have to drive all the way to his yard to come get it, about 2 hours away. Thus ended a very interesting 24 hours in my life. The loan company had apparently been applying my payments to someone else's account and somehow failed to call me and ask why I was 3 months behind when in reality I wasn't. Got 3 months of credits for the inconvenience. TL. DR. Repo men are people too. Currently work in a repo yard. Our drivers get guns pulled on them all the time. We have to swap out side panels on our tow trucks almost monthly on account of debtors shooting at them as they drive away. Most of these people honestly think we're stealing their stuff. Word of advice: don't try buying things you can't afford. Life would be much easier. Never broke into a car, never hotwired a car, never broke into a truck. I shall not cause harm to any vehicle nor the personal contents thereof, nor through an action let the personal contents thereof come to harm. It's what I call the repo code. This guy thinks he's better than all of us. Get him. Stepdad owned a towing business while I was a kid and did repos from time to time. He had been stabbed twice and shot in the shoulder, attacked with a baseball bat, and been in fist fights several times. People are pieces of shoots. Luckily his was about 6 feet to 350 pounds, so they usually calm down quickly, but not always the case. I've seen people park their cars 2 miles from their house to throw me off. You own a car, sort of, yet you walk 2 miles to and from your car to keep it from being repossessed. I've found cars up to a mile from their workplace. The best one was a woman who parked her car in the garage at home and in a secure garage at work. I parked my truck a couple of houses down and slowly walked by her house around the time that she left for work. The garage door opened. She started her car. She goes back in the house for something and I jumped in her car and drove away. It was completely illegal for me to go in her garage, but the possibility of losing that awful job was worth listening to her scream at me at the top of her lungs as I screeched out of there. I only repossessed cars for 6 months, but I have endless stories of getting shot at, beaten up, chased by thugs, you name it. This is my all-time favorite repo story. Years ago we had a customer that took out a loan for a vehicle. In the beginning this customer paid very well, but all of a sudden her payments kept getting further and further behind until she was way behind and in trouble. She called the manager to talk to him about what she could do and told my manager that her son had heart problems and was in a local hospital that specializes in children. We worked out something for her, but she still did not make payments. She came into the office when the other lady and I were the only two there. She told us all about her son's illness and that he may need heart surgery. Her son wasn't even school age. We'd seen that child. He had come into the office with his mother more than once. We were heartbroken for this lady. She was crying and we were crying with her. I asked if would she like my church to pray for her child and her family. She said she would. Although no names are used, a person we knew thought they recognized the family. He went to speak to the family. Later he told me that he must have been wrong because the child of the family he knew was perfectly well. I didn't tell him anything. I didn't even answer him clearly. He didn't go to the wrong family. When he told me the name of the family he went to, I knew that was my customer. She had been lying to us about that child this entire time. Not only was that child not in the hospital, but he had never been sick. Her husband didn't know she even had this loan. He certainly did not know that his son was being used as an excuse for not paying this loan. My repo company repossessed that car on the parking lot of Toys R Us on Christmas Eve. It had Santa Claus in the back seat. I still think about that stupid woman and I wonder if she and her then husband are even still married. It had Santa Claus in the back seat. I stupid that woman. No doubt. I have an amusing story from a friend of mine about an unethical tow truck driver. Basically he was in a subway parking lot waiting for his wife to arrive. She arrived after maybe 20 minutes and they went into Subway and he looks out the window to see a tow truck taking his car. He runs out after his car followed by his pregnant wife, followed by the Subway guy with a giant loaf of bread. They argue for a bit. The cops get called and the repo guy got towed away to jail. Turns out he was pretending to be a cop and extorting people out of their money. I would like the story better if the Subway guy opened a can of whoop butt using Italian herb and cheese, but what can you do? The story made a lot more sense once I realized they were in a Subway and not a Subway. Check out Repo on YouTube. His vids are decent and he has got a lot better at editing and crap. All sorts of crazy crap from mothers sticking babies in a repo, getting chased for a mile by a guy barefoot, repoing the same rich broad's Jeep twice, people sticking razor blades and door handles and more. Not a repo guy, but someone who almost had his car repoed. It was a Sunday afternoon sometime during 2012. And me and my dad had just got home from church. Mom and sister weren't home yet. Can't remember what me and my dad were doing at the time, and really isn't important to the story anyway. During this time, I see someone show up with a truck and trailer. Not exactly an unusual sight at the time since we had an old station wagon in the yard that people would often ask if it was for sale. Most likely those people were looking for a derby car, so thinking this was just another person looking about the station wagon, I go to check to see why they had showed up. Turns out, they weren't there to see about the station wagon. They were there to repossess my car. One small problem for them though, I paid cash for the car and I had the title for it too. I quickly go get my dad since this situation was something that I didn't want to deal with alone. Me and my dad are talking to them. We ask them why they are trying to take the car. They claim they owned a used car lot in a nearby city, and that my car was bought from their lot and a previous owner stopped paying on it. So we ask them how did they find it. They said the courthouse county clerk told them that someone that was not my name had registered the car at our address. Some time after this, I told them I have the title for the car. They said they wanted to see it, so I went and grabbed it from the house and show it to them. After a few more minutes of talking and them looking at the title, they hand the title back to me and leave. Not long after they left, we called the cops on them just in case there was something shady going on there. They never showed back up either and I never had a problem like that again with the car. I'm surprised by the butthole repo men stories on here. Just recently my wife and I found ourselves with a decrease in income and having to decide what to do about her car payment. We eventually just stopped paying, and she called to tell them, hey, come get the car, we're going with something cheaper. That was 5 months ago. They just came to get the car 2 nights ago and were very cool and apologetic. One guy even said, hey, sorry, and I said, nah, it's good we got a replacement. They weren't dongs about it at all. It's probably because you guys called instead of hiding the car or lying. Another story, we had one repo company that was bolder than most. This guy is the same guy that repossessed the car on the parking lot of the toy store on Christmas Eve. We had a customer that kept their car in a fenced yard. You can't repo something in our state if it's fenced in or in the garage. For that reason, there were times when he watched the customer to see if perhaps they were going to drive that car somewhere. But they did. He spotted them in the drive-thru at the bank. He blocked the customer in by pulling in front of them. Evidently there was another car behind the customer. He convinced the customer to get out of the car and he hooked it and took it off. I worked for a major finance company in the US a few years ago. We had one debtor that bought a new and never paid a payment and kept the car hidden in the woods behind his house. We likely would have never found it, but people like to talk and he bragged about it to his co-workers. One day one of his co-workers called us anonymously because she was tired of hearing about it. We had been looking for the car for a year or more and found it that night. We once repoed a car from a guy while he was at a friend's Christmas party and once repoed a car from a lady who came in to pay a payment. She was 6 or 7 months past due and had been hiding the car and somehow thought a half payment was good enough. We didn't actually do the repo, so we had to call an agent to get there before she left. We also repoed a van from a couple who had a son with some sort of disability and thought for some reason because of that we should just give them a free vehicle and thought the way to go about getting the free vehicle was to finance a car and then just never pay any payments and we would just let it go. Not me, but the boss of a friend was telling me of a couple that rented a TV from an errands and skipped out on the bills. When they rolled around to the home, They found out that the owners had built the TV into the wall. When the boss told them he needed to take it, they told him that he could, but that he had to get it out himself and not damage the house. So the boss took off his shoe and used it to smash the glass on the TV. Then he turned to the couple and said, "We'll write it off," and left. Most badass thing I'd ever heard. That's amazing. I can't imagine how pissed off those people were. First, it really, truly is not their property at all. Goodwill and garage sales are your friend, dear renter owners. You can't be upvoted enough. My grandfather would always say that's a nice car the bank owns. Depending on the state and what's being repoed, this could be as simple as closing the gate. In some state, repo agents can't enter a secured property even if the thing they need to repo is in plain sight. As evidenced by a comment above yours, not all repo guys follow the law. If you're going to rely on that, you had better have a camera on it to prove they broke the law. Had a man jump off a second-story balcony while his friend screamed at me. He botched the jump, broke his crap, got up for a moment, then fell again. I laughed. We took his car. Not a repo man, but slightly relevant. Repo man comes to my dad's work to take the car after my parents filed for bankruptcy in 2007. Now this was a 2003 Kia Magentis with all the bells and whistles she could come with at the time. Not a dang thing wrong with the car. Only 4 years old. Just had slightly high mileage from all of dad's business trips. Repo man takes a look at it and says, "No, I don't want it," and leaves. We got to keep a $36,000 car for only 4 years worth of payments. She crapped out in 2010, but still. I worked at a bank. Guy who helped with the repos got his car stolen. He left his car running while he went into the convenience store. Came out and the car was gone. Had to call the bank for a ride. I don't understand people that do this, or that don't lock their doors. It's like you want your crap stolen. Not my story, though I did repo some stuff. This guy I knew worked for a collection agency for car payments. He would just call them up, offer some hella good deal if they'd come down to sign the papers, then have someone repo the car out of the parking lot while they were inside talking. He had security at the door so they couldn't get back in once they figured it out. Former repo man here. Almost every day on that job produced some kind of craziness. I'm not very good at telling stories, but one that stands out in my mind was this crappy Chevy Malibu. It was a straw buy. Someone buys a vehicle, gives it to someone that isn't on the credit app, then never makes a payment. Multiple companies searched for this vehicle for years. After a couple weeks of skip tracing, we found it at a crappy house in the ghetto. Now, the people that lived here thought they were smart. They had a locked gate around the property. My partner and I took apart that gate until we could swing it open and back our truck into the driveway. The people were furious, naturally, but they couldn't prove we had done anything wrong. We got a nice bonus for that one colon. Lucky they didn't have CCTV. Surprising with the whole gate thing, you all would have been fricked if they did. Not a repo man, loan officer at a credit union. And I indirectly killed a guy. Repoed a guy's car. About a week later, he takes the bus home from work, around 1 AM. The bus stop was a couple miles from his house, and his mom was supposed to pick him up, but she overslept, so he starts walking home, down a fairly busy road. At 1 AM, in the sketchy part of town, someone hits him in a hit and run. They never caught the driver. They found the guy literally dead in a ditch the next morning. It's not your fault. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.